What I want to talk about today is perfectly illustrated both by Donnell's treatment of the text, and I think the way that Donnell, you handle those questions at the end about the relevance, the applicability, the appropriateness of a text like this in a classroom like today. And I think we see just how illuminating and how powerful and empowering an encounter with an ancient text, a text that has a kind of a root status in our culture, with all the complication, all the mixed legacy that means, just how powerful a text like that can be. So I won't talk for too long. I want to make sure we stay on track. But I just want to highlight the interconnectedness of two issues that are often treated as being separate, if not incompatible. One is the traditional liberal arts curriculum based on the study of transformative texts. And the second is our increasingly diverse student body and our concern to create a campus environment that not only welcomes that diversity, but that is able to fulfill the promise that this diversity presents. The main point I want to make about the way that these two things are interconnected is that a liberal arts education based on the study of texts of major historical significance is critical to the project of inclusion and diversity to which we are committed. This kind of education is called liberal because of its emancipatory power, its liberatory power. It is a tool for transformation and emancipation that has special significance to traditionally disadvantaged students. I have the privilege of teaching with Donnell in the Freedom and Citizenship program, about which I'll say a word in a minute. But I think both Donnell and I are examples of people who at some point in their lives had an encounter with texts that were culturally alien, that were difficult, that were ancient, but somehow those texts touched us in some profound way and reoriented our vision, so that today you get this spectacle of two Dominican immigrant kids to New York ending up as classics professors at Princeton and American Studies professor at Columbia, because of an encounter that we had with texts that were in some fundamental way alien to us. There's a superficially appealing idea floating around universities and elsewhere that in order to foster diversity and inclusion, our curricula should move away from the study of what one might call canonical texts. And I think that this notion misses the points that introducing students to important works from our literary and philosophical past serves a key democratizing function. It builds the students' understanding of how the world has come to be what it is, and gives them the tools and the historical awareness that are necessary for effective intervention in that world. We do students a big disservice, especially our so-called disadvantaged students, an unconscionable disservice when we steer them away from this traditional liberal arts curriculum. The two issues that I want to touch on briefly with those thoughts as a preface are the evident issue of diversity and the issue of accessibility. And Donnell has already talked, I think, in really profound ways and penetrating ways about this question of diversity and how to handle texts like this in a diverse classroom. Because we have to recognize that there is an obvious problem with this literary and philosophical past of ours, that lies at the kind of ancestor of the contemporary Western and in particular American society. There is a big problem with them. In the form that this tradition has come down to us in the form of text, it is dominated by dead white men. So any overview of important works in the Western tradition will exclude groups that represents many of our students. It's a basic problem that we have to contend with if we are going to give our students a sense of the evolution and development of the institutions, the norms, the categories that organize our contemporary social life. And obviously we can take several approaches. One is to just jettison the whole thing, to write off the whole tradition and put it in some corner where, if you want to major in classics, or if you want to make it a special object of your study, you can go and seek them out and find them. But I think a more intellectually honest, though more difficult approach, is to bring a critical eye to that tradition, to put it at the center of general education under a critical lens, under the hermeneutics of suspicion, as Danielle said. We can do that. We can read this text. In fact, we must read these texts without venerating them as the fountain of wisdom and goodness, but also without dismissing them as mere expressions of Eurocentrism, oppression, and exploitation. That is the challenge before us. But let me say that the way that we meet that challenge has to eschew what I think is ultimately a false choice, a false dilemma between either reading canonical texts, by which I mainly mean very old texts, or texts that articulate and engage with the diversity of our contemporary life. In short, canonical texts have to be read not instead of a more diverse set of voices, but as the basis of a more diverse set of voices. And this is, I really want to emphasize this, that this idea of reading canonical texts as the basis for reading more diverse voices that are more representative of our contemporary life, that is not just for people from marginalized identities, but for everyone. It is as much a mistake to think that students from underrepresented backgrounds can only see themselves in texts by people who look like them. It is just as mistaken to assume that texts that reflect our contemporary diversity only speak powerfully to students who share those backgrounds. So we have to do not one or the other, we have to do both. And that's what general education is there for. So let me say a word about accessibility. Because one of the things that I hear often when I talk about programs like this, when I talk about the Columbia Core Curriculum, which I directed for a long time, is the idea that, well, these texts, like this Cicero text or the Republic or the Politics of Aristotle, Columbia and Princeton students, they can read that, but out here and teaching this community college where I teach, or in this state university where I teach, we have a different kind of student. We have a kind of working class students and very diverse student body, and these texts are not accessible to them. And the best answer I have to that objection is my experience in the Freedom and Citizenship program, the program that Danielle and I both teach in at Columbia every summer. We bring to campus a group of high school students who are going into their senior year. And they are all from low-income families and the first in their families to attempt to attend college. The centerpiece of this program is this seminar called Freedom and Citizenship. In that seminar, I teach a section, Danielle teaches a section, Tamara Mann teaches a third section. We spend 1 week reading Plato, reading ancient texts, Plato, Aristotle, Thucydides, another week reading texts from the Enlightenment, Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau, Jefferson, and the third week looking at American texts, Lincoln, Frederick Douglass, Martin Luther King Jr., and others. And when I started teaching in this program, I wondered, is this going to work? do low-income, first-generation, college-bound, urban young people have anything to learn from, say, Thucydides? Can Aristotle and Plato speak to them? Can they really connect with the radical ideas of John Locke or grapple with the terrible dilemmas of Abraham Lincoln? And the answer has been yes. And what is really amazing to me is what this encounter does to these students. I see students undergo a kind of inner awakening. They spend a month living at Columbia, interacting with Columbia students, speaking with faculty every day. In the classroom, they discover that they have things to say about the issues that we read in those famous books. Over the course of just a few weeks, they come to understand themselves as having the standing to read Plato, to disagree with Aristotle, to share the worries of Thomas Hobbes, to soar with the aspirations of Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And the reason they respond so powerfully to these texts is that in them, they encounter a tradition of thought that frames their own social being and which gives them tools with which to address the injustices and failings that they see around them. Time after time, I hear students reporting that this encounter has helped them overcome a sense of powerlessness and passivity towards the social forces that seem to be dominating their lives and to be beyond their reach. This past summer, we taught the course online, a big experiment, and I think we did well. I'll mention two comments from two students that I got this summer, and I'm sure Danelle got comments that were very much along the same lines. Answering the question, what did you enjoy most about the program? One student wrote, the readings. I have never felt so engaged in the text, and getting a glimpse into this author's mind is inspiring. It can be confusing, but I was all right with that because it made me question and question. Another student writing in answer to the question, what would you change about the program? Writes, in my opinion, I think the seminar can be a little longer, as the seminar with the professor is only 2 hours. This is every day. I have to say, as much as I appreciate that comment, the professor reference here, who is me, does not share this sentiment about 2 hours not being long enough every day. Let me end with this image. This is outline of seminar in social philosophy first semester. Want you to just scroll up and see that a couple of things here. Note the fact that this is outline of seminar in social philosophy first semester. So there is a second semester that's implied here. This one semester takes you from Plato to John Stuart Mill to the utilitarian. So there's an implied second semester that one imagines will come from the mid-19th century to contemporary times. Notice the specificity of the dates of the authors and the chronology. It's a roughly chronological approach. The specificity of the selections of each work there. You will probably not recognize the handwriting here, but this is a course in social philosophy taught by Martin Luther King, and this is his handwriting, and he taught it at Morehouse in 1962. He was already the civil rights leader who would 1 year later lead the march in Washington and deliver the I Have a Dream speech. But here in the one course that he teaches at Morehouse, this is what he chooses to do. This, to me, is such a powerful instance of this very thing that we're talking about today. How this tradition, in fact, is uniquely important and empowering for students who have been marginalized, whose communities have been marginalized, and who are struggling with the legacies of social marginalization, oppression, subjugation. Let me end with this thought, which is to remind you that even though our students come to college to secure their economic future, they're not indifferent to inner awakening. They are, in fact, obsessed with moral questions and are struggling with the threat of meaninglessness in their lives. Even when they may not be aware of it, they are looking for a way to ground not just their careers, but their lives. In this profound way, courses like the ones we're talking about here give them something that they can really use. Okay, I'll stop there and turn it over to Lonnie and Andy, the master of ceremonies.